Hi, everybody. So my name is Rob De Feo, a startup evangelist here at AWS, and I focus on working with startups all across EMEA. So today we're going to be talking to you about your MVP. So first of all, what does that term mean? So it actually has three very important and distinct elements to it. So it's the minimal. It needs to be the first thing that you can ship. It has to be valuable. It has to solve some sort of problem. And it needs to have a product element to it. It needs to be a complete solution for somebody. So when the term MVP is really vague, and when we're trying to understand, so what do we mean by that? What should it look like at the end? And I think this quote sums it up really well. There's no, if you're shipping an MVP and it looks perfect, it does a great job, and it looks beautiful, you've done it too late. A lot of this talk is really about helping you get this done faster and quicker. So you should feel a little bit uncomfortable when you are giving this to other people. Be a bit embarrassed. You'll get feedback much faster, and the lower fidelity it is, the quicker you'll get that. So there's quite a few different versions of a minimal viable product. So viable is where you're trying to see if something is possible. Is this going to work or not? But you may have different hypotheses. You may sort of say, actually, I'm not trying to see if it's possible. I want to see if I can make it easier to use. Is there a product out there in the market that people use, but they don't like the experience? Can I make a usable product, something that gives that? And that's lovable as well. Perhaps there's things we use at work in our professional lives, but our personal versions are better of it. So are there products that if you gave a different user experience, people would love to use them? Is your hypothesis that somebody needs to be able to love the product to get something more from it? And the last one we talk about is testable. You may just be trying to find out to test a hypothesis. One of the best examples of this is Airbnb. They had, we all know what Airbnb are today. It's where you can go and stop in someone's apartment. But at the beginning, the idea of stopping or having a stranger sleep in your apartment or go into a stranger's apartment and sleep in there was strange. It was really alien. So what you want to do is test that hypothesis. Test the hypothesis that your customers are willing to sleep in other people's apartments. Then test the second most risky hypothesis. People are willing to rent their rooms out to strangers. Once you do that, you can go on to the next stage. So the type of minimal product you make depends on what you're trying to achieve. And then with a minimal viable product, and this is really important, it should look more, if you have a product that looks like this, as in the first iteration is essentially useless, it's just a wheel. The second one, fine, there's an axis, but still you can't use it. Then later on, there's something there, but it's still lacking the mechanics to get you from A to B. If you compare this to a more iterative approach, you're giving someone the ability to achieve their task, get from A to B, but you're improving the quality of it each time along. So the people, your users still get some benefit from it, but they get a better and better experience or more and more fidelity from it. So try and keep that in mind when you're building your product. So what I'm going to talk to you about are these four areas. And the first one is the development process. It's a really unusual time when you're building your MVP. For many of us, it's the only time, the first time we've done it, and possibly the only time we're ever going to do it. So there's a few things to be aware of. You want to get into these really fast design, build, deploy, and measure loops. And you want to do them as quickly as possible. And the aim of each loop is to improve your product by a few percentage points each time. That's it. And you keep doing that again and again and again. So to do this, one of the most common formats of it is what we call a sprint. And a sprint is a short block of time, and you can choose a duration. And it's a complete deliverable. So if you're the development team, you have a design phase, a development stage, and a deployment stage. And at the end of your first sprint, you might not have much to show for it, but there should be something deployed out there. The other key thing about a sprint, and this is for both the business, the CEO side and the CTO side, or business and technical, is that uninterrupted. If you're a developer and you've committed to the work, you deliver it. And if you're a business person, you've got a great idea, you keep hold of it. You've got a few more days to figure out what it is, but you should not be interrupting. You need to let these sprints go uninterrupted. And for that reason, and for a few other reasons, the shorter the better. The sprints can be of any duration. There's no set time limit on them. They can be a day, a week, a month, or 3 weeks. If you're deciding between 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and or 4 week sprints, pick the lower option. That would be my suggestion. And even 1 week sprints are okay. You'll only get small things done, but you'll get them done quickly, and it's very, very rewarding. The next is if we're going to plan what to do in a sprint. And the way that we plan tasks is, there's a simple formula that you kind of think of. One would be, OK, what is the expected benefit? What's my revenue? How long is this going to take? You put that in a sheet, and then you figure out where there is a short tasks that give good benefit and return. The problem with that is we often don't have enough data. And the first benefit the benefit you're looking for might be revenue, and you might be pre-revenue. So I would suggest a really simple little chart like this. So where we have the cross-axis is how long it takes to build. Does it fit in one single sprint or not? And then is this going to make a difference to the thing that you care about or not? So there are some tasks that are quick to build, but your users aren't really asking for it. They're tempting, but these are a distraction. These are the things that you feel like you're doing, but it's just busy work. The other ones, and these are great, they're fast to build, and they're highly impactful. This is where you want to put all of your energy, exactly here. The next one is these are really impactful tasks, but they're going to take longer than a sprint. And you'll find a lot of your work falls into this area, because this is the work that matters, and often things that matter take time. And this is where you need to break this task down so they can fit in that single focus area and get it done in one sprint. And in this area, you just need to avoid it altogether. This is the undifferentiated area that we would call. And so we'll help you removing and avoiding these tasks when we can. So this is the key. For the breakdown phase, this is what we mean for it. What you want to do is take that task and reduce it into smaller sizes. And the size you want to get it to is as we've defined it here. So one engineer can complete this. And it can be done in a single sprint, and it adds some value. And this makes it really easy to prioritize. And when you have reduced the scope of a particular task, it's really easy to say that it's done. It's really easy for an engineer to be able to complete it to what you've asked for. So this is one of the most important tasks when you're defining the things that you should be building inside your MVP. And stand-ups are another really important thing to have and to get in a habit for. And you should do them every day. And a stand-up is where you bring everyone together from all of the teams. And the first thing they should do is just give a status update. And they should be really time-bounded. So it should be 1 minute maximum per person. I've worked at a place before we had a stopwatch. It was brutal, but it worked. And you say what you did yesterday, what you intend to do today, and anything you're stuck on. And that's it. And in total, it should be 15 minutes maximum. You don't want this to be taken up a lot of the time. Now, people here might work with remote teams or people working from home. You should still have some form of stand-up. If everyone's in the same time zone, dial everyone into your video conferencing tool. If you're in different time zones, have the first thing people do when they wake up is dropping a message into Slack saying what they're doing yesterday, today, and what they're doing tomorrow. This helps speed up the communication between teams, and for the rest of the day, you get on with it. There are no other meetings during a sprint. So the next piece is to make a sprint complete, you need to be shipping releases. So you need to be continuously deploying the changes that you've made. And CodeStar gives you this whole end-to-end continuous deployment pipeline. So you have code commit, or your favorite Git repository, the ability to do the builds, some unit testing or other testing on top of it, and then you can deploy it. And this is all wrapped up with a pipeline that takes you from phase to phase to phase. So as during your sprint, you should be shipping and deploying. So there's always something available for your users and your internal teams to see and to test and to see how it's going. Now, we sort of said before, when you're building your MVP, it's a really unusual phase. There's this time when you're doing something you'll never do again. Now, what often happens, if we imagine this graph, let me explain it to you, the small dots indicate, the size of the dot indicates how long it takes to do a task. So the smaller the dot, the faster it is, the bigger the dot, the longer it takes. And the further along it is in here is the time it takes for some impact to happen. Because there's some features I build that I know my users are not going to need right now, but in the future. Scaling is one of them. But there's many, many others that go along there. Now, when I ask startups what they've been working on the last couple of weeks or months, and how it relates to this is not unusual. You've got some short tasks that have impact, small tasks have impact now, done. They're your quick fixes, the things that happen. But there's some things they've been working on that are big tasks, and they have a big impact later on. And then I ask them, well, hold on a second, how long is your runway? And the amount of times that line falls in there, all their effort is after they're going to run out of money. And then think about, well, how can I reorganize this? What you really want to be doing is tasks that have a meaning and matter now. This runway will stretch out as you get to the next stage of development. But during your MVP, the key is to produce a product that's going to show that there is a market and you can address the fit for it with the product that you're building. So you really want to be very, very aggressive with the prioritization of that roadmap. Spend time with your teams in the planning phase each time to make sure you know where the work is being done. Now, to counter this, because there's some things that you do need to do that are long-term and they take time, is how are you going to do that? Rob, all I'm going to do is create technical debt. And technical debt is where you build something quickly, but there's problems inside of it. And you're building up these problems later on. You're going to have to pay them off. And you're absolutely right. If you follow the approach I've been suggesting up until now, you will build up technical debt over time. And it will cost you more to fix that technical debt over time. Like any debt, the sooner you address it, the cheaper it is. The thing is, many of us in early stage startups, we might have one engineer or a handful of engineers. And while the cost of fixing the future is higher, the cost to fix it right now is the most expensive it possibly can be. You might be dedicating your whole engineering team to fixing a problem in the future that your users may not even have because they may not use your product that way. So really be clear about this. I would say technical debt is acceptable to accrue when you're building your MVP. Now, sometimes we build a product that needs to talk to any different type of service. Let's say I'm doing a travel application. I want to talk to all the different hotel APIs out there. And there may be hundreds. If you're trying to build a generic system, that's really difficult. Really, really difficult. But talking to one API is usually pretty simple. And where's the middle point in this? Because if I build it for one, it becomes really rigid. But if I build for two systems, that's usually pretty simple. I know what they both are, I can compare it, and I start to build some flexibility in. That's the key. Because if I build for one, it's too rigid. If I build for n systems, it's too vague. But two systems gets you a really long way there. And then you can start to expand it and break it out further as you go along. This is really key. And think in your heads if you can guess what the sentence after this is going to be. But as a developer, I love to build things. It's really fun. It's very satisfying. As a developer, I hate to maintain things. It's not satisfying. It takes up time. So everything you build, you need to maintain. So the less you build, the less that you're maintaining. And then it really comes down to only building the things that make a difference to your business. And this is kind of where the cloud comes in. This is the proposition of all the major cloud providers. You don't need to have infrastructure provisioning. There's no management for it. It will scale for you. That whole scaling problem that startups 10 years ago had to work with has now largely disappeared. And the really cool thing is, if you use serverless technologies, you only pay for the time you're using them. It's like pay as you go. And so you have these really secure and highly available systems available to you that you can just plug in, and they answer use case type questions. So it's authentication, analytics, machine learning, and many, many more. So what I'd say, when you're building something, you should put production-ready code into your users' hands. Your users expect this product to work. Well, they may be sympathetic because this is the only way they can solve their particular problem. It still needs to work. So I would focus, instead of trying to solve all the edge cases, figure out how your users primarily use your product and work on that one. Create a production-ready code with unit tests, documentation, everything that works. And then, as time goes on, add in the other use cases to increase the feature completeness. Don't try and produce lots of different features at the beginning. Just focus on a single thread, and you'll get more narrow and a better quality product out the back of it. And each time then, with each iteration, you can add these features on. And that way, you have a reliable product that your users may not do everything they want with, but it works. And a working product is essential. At the early stage, there's many things that people think of when they're trying to figure out, well, how do I prioritize for what I'm doing? And I would say the most important thing here is you are in this phase of discovery. You need to learn as much about the product, the market, and your users as possible. So when you're deciding what tasks to do, optimize for learning. Try and figure out, if I do this task, what would I learn about my users? That's often more useful or valuable than figuring out the immediate revenue. Do as many experiments as possible. Really, the essence here is every experiment you can do, you find out something new. You either open your space of possibilities or you close off options, and both are equally important. And don't be afraid of using a prototype. And a prototype I would distinguish different from an MVP, as in an MVP is a product, and it needs to work. A prototype can just be, let me see what this does. Let me see what it looks like. Let me see if it's possible. So really use prototypes as throwaway concepts that you can kind of work on the code, experiment with something, and then later bring it into your MVP afterwards. So when we're building a product, we want to know how it can possibly look like. And at AWS, we have many different tools and services that allow you to build your product on top of the platform. So we're going to go through a few of them. So many of you may have heard of the concept of a monolith. And a monolith is a single application where all the features are built inside of it. And it does everything. And they are good things. A well-built monolith will scale to many, many users' requirements without any particular work on top of it. It's a good place to start with. And to deploy a monolith, you've got many different options. You can deploy it into Lightsail, which gives you a server. It allows you to have like a WordPress website or other frameworks as well. Or you could deploy it onto Elastic Beanstalk. And Elastic Beanstalk gives you multiple different frameworks from Node, Java, Python, or even Docker containers, and it will scale them and create databases for you behind the scenes. The other thing you can do is build in microservices. Each microservice does one thing. In combination, they do many things. So they will take the place of a monolith when combined together. And the thing to think of here is it's difficult to do this at the beginning because you need to think of these layers of how they talk to each other. But we have different services that make that much easier. So the API gateway allows you to connect your different Lambda functions, your microservices, to them. So perhaps you build your API to talk to another API. Then later you add in authentication, and you can have a website in front of it. And you could provide another data store as well. And then you can expand it like this. You can create your mobile application that could also talk to the API. And this could use Fargate or any other AWS service to expand its features and functionality. If we're thinking of building a mobile application, AWS Amplify is a great place to start. It allows you to quickly get up and running with a command line interface and add features like hosting for web and mobile applications and back-end databases. You can build authentication in. You can add Lambda functions or search functionality with Elasticsearch as well. And these are all just done through the command line, and it provisions all the resources for you. It's one of the easiest ways to get started if you're building a mobile or web application. Sometimes, though, we just want to put a static website online. We've got a blog or we've got a landing page. And the easiest and best ways of doing that is using something called AWS Amplify. And this allows you to provision different resources online and have different test environments, and is a really simple way to get started. For many of us, containers are the place that we will start. And we have multiple different container technologies to do this, ranging from Elastic Beanstalk, where you can deploy a monolith hosted inside a container, all the way through to ECS, Elastic Container Service, and Elastic Kubernetes Service, and also our serverless container service called Fargate. And there's special cases. For example, if you're building an analytics application, you may want to think really differently about this. And you'll use streaming technology so that you can ingest as much data as you want without having interruptions. So Amazon Kinesis does this for you. And then you perhaps just store it into S3 as like a pipeline just to store things, Sprint 1. Sprint 2, you'd say, OK, let me put an API gateway in front so I can accept data from other places. And also, I want to not only store it, I want to be able to query the information. I'll use Amazon Athena and QuickSight to create dashboards I can send to my users. And then Sprint 3. You can add in search functionality with Elasticsearch, and you can put alarms, real-time alarms with Kinesis data analytics and CloudWatch. And then you can send notifications to your users as well. So the last thing we're going to touch on are the core foundations. Well, largely, I've told you how to do things quickly, and I've suggested you areas where you can cut corners. There are some things, and we call them one-way doors, that are difficult to change. And these are the areas where I suggest that you actually over-invest time in to make sure you get it right from the very beginning, because it's difficult to change later on. And they fall into 3 different areas. And the first one is security. Your users are going to expect a secure system, one that works, one that keeps their data safe, and one that is not vulnerable to attack. And using these services, for example, Contenu allows you to put authentication on with a click of a few buttons. Certificate Manager, you can have your SSL certificates secured. And CloudFront presents a DDoS-resistant front end to your websites. And each of these services allows you to very quickly get up and running with secure systems without having to make compromises of time. Then think of your application as in someone needs to use it. Now, you might be building an API, you might be building a website, you might build a mobile application. So each of these are going to be interpreted differently. But if I'm a developer and I'm using your API, as a developer, I'll experiment with anything. But I can only integrate it if you have documentation. I need to know how it works under all the failure scenarios. And the Open API Initiative, or it used to be called Swagger, is a great way of defining your API, writing the specification document, and then you can send it with your users. They can work with mocks before you've had to build it all. And the final thing is, think of the data model. When you store data, it's really difficult to change that data where it's stored later on. So try and think of the data access patterns. If you've got relational data, store it in a relational database. If there's users, accounts, blog posts, etc., this is a great place for it. And in-memory databases will give you a fast access over the top of it. If you've got key value stores and you need to access quickly individual keys, DynamoDB will be a great possibility for that. And the same with document database into DocumentDB. Then these are the special use cases you might have. Whether it's graph database, if you want to be able to understand how relationships transpire with each other, then you can use Neptune. If you've got data that comes in a time series, then you'll be able to store it inside of TimeStream. And finally, if you've got a ledger, and you want to have a reliable source of information that you can quantify as never changed, you can use the Quantum Ledger database. So we've gone through a lot here today, and thank you so much for your time. I think we've made sure we have a little bit of time for questions. So if anyone has any questions, please do let me know. But also, I'll be around here afterwards and over at the stand as well. I think there's a microphone going around.
Thank you. Hello. So thank you. Are there any questions? Do you have questions? Or everything was?
Please don't be shy. There's a lot that's in there.
So? Question? So, that was a really great masterclass. So everything understood?
It looks like it, yeah, it's brilliant. Anyway, I really look forward to seeing what you all build in the future then, and thank you so much for your time. The last thing just to note is over at the stands we have an Activate offer available. So if you're an early stage startup and you're starting your business or you've recently started, if you'd like to come over, we have a credit offer which allows you to get access to use the AWS services credits so that you don't have to spend your real hard-earned money, and you can get experimenting and building a lot of this as fast as possible. So just come over and find anyone with a t-shirt that looks a bit like this, and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you.
Merci. Thank you.